I'm surprised that so many people are here to talk about such a subject as together building a united community, but I'm delighted that these are here. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Gerard Deane and I work for Holywell Trust, and together, along with Peace and Reconciliation Group and the Junction, we're pulling together a submission to the inquiry and to this fine strategy. We did a similar exercise to this on the 16th of September when we had a conversation space event, and we had less people, I think it's fair to say, but a really good conversation. But the conversation ended up depressing everybody in the room because we looked at the strategy in a bit of detail and we thought, right, let's try not to focus on the negatives here. So what I'm going to do today is to give you a bit of an overview into the background information concerning the Together Building a United Community strategy. And then the main part of today, I want you to be talking among yourselves, because what we want to do is focus on the positives here and see what we want to be in this strategy or a strategy like it for the future. And I think that's the most positive thing that we can come up with. So to give you a wee bit of background on it, the strategy was published on the 23rd of May 2013. Not to be too blunt about it, but the G8 was coming and they needed to get something together, so they fired it out. And it very much reads like that. The terms of reference for this inquiry, which are on the table, that one sheet, were agreed on the 2nd of July of this year, and there's a deadline for responses of the 10th of this month. So the terms of reference you've got two handouts there. The terms of reference is three elements to it. The first is they want to gauge perspectives on sectarianism, division and good relations, broadly speaking. The second thing they want to do is to find out what good relations means and how sectarianism can be addressed with a particular focus on interface areas. And the last thing they're going to do through their inquiry is to make recommendations that will enhance policy and decision making with regards to building a united community. And their headline priorities are there. These are their headline priorities, not the ones that I've picked. And that's the other document that you have. The other document is the first 9 or 10 pages of the strategy itself, and it's basically a summary of what's in it. But what they want to do is to establish 10 new shared education campuses, get 10,000 young people within what's broadly called the NEETs category, not in education, training or employment, a place on the new United Youth Volunteering Programme. They want to establish 10 new shared housing schemes, develop 4 new village schemes, developing significant programme cross-community sporting events, remove interface barriers by 2013, and they have 100 shared summer schools by 2015. Okay, so that's basic. It's all there in front of you if you want to have a good look at it. What I'm going to tell you now are some of the issues that we have with it. And then, rather than focus on those issues and on the negativity, I want to engage each of you, or each of your tables, to come up with what we want to see in a document of this kind. So, our issues are, quite simply, I looked up a definition of a strategy, and it said there was 2 things. It was a method or plan to choose to bring about a desired future, such as the achievement of a goal or solution to a problem. And that was grand. I thought, that's great. I don't know if this strategy fits in within that definition, because a desired future isn't exactly clear from the document. And then the other definition was the art and science of planning and marshalling resources for their effective and efficient use, which would be brilliant if anywhere in the strategy they mentioned resources at all, because they don't. So,
really be chosen.
Eh?
A commitment plan chosen.
What does it say?
Chosen.
I can't type down some words, sorry. Other issues that we have. I will go back and change this for the next time I do this presentation, which will be never, is where's the money? There's reference in there to resource good relations and the importance of resource and good relations work, and that it's really important that it's clear and precise who's going to do this. There's no mention of actual amounts, where it's coming from, who's going to give it out, how they're going to give it out, or what it's going to be used for. On time frames, there are a number of actions and recommendations within the document. There's only 3 time frames. One of them is to come up with or to review the good relations indicators, which was to be done by the end of December 2013. No evidence of it having been done yet. The other two, one was to deliver 100 summer schools or diversionary programs, whatever the language is, by 2015. And the final one, which has caused particular issue with our colleagues, mostly in Belfast as opposed to here, is that they're going to remove all interfaces, all the peace walls, all the barriers between communities by 2023. And they're the only three things that they've committed themselves to a timeline on. Another issue is that this document relates directly to the programme for government. The programme for government itself isn't the strongest thing in good relations, but the programme for government at this point in time expires in March of next year. This inquiry is going to take until about April of next year. So unless the programme for government is extended, which they think it might be, it all depends on talks which are about to start, I think might have a certain influence on that. But this is tied directly to the programme of government. So when that programme expires, technically so does this document. And the other thing is, we don't know. I was at an event run by the Community Relations Council, and they asked people in the room, was anybody involved in the formation of the document and the strategies and what's in here? And I think one person out of 50 said, I talked to somebody, and it was a phone call. There's none of us were involved in the development of this document. It's not ours, there's no ownership of it. Vision, where are we heading? Challenges of the past are acknowledged but not addressed. They say that there are a number of challenges from the past. There's dealing with victims, survivors, combatants, ex-combatants, all those difficult issues around flags and emblems and marching and things. Their solution to it is that they're going to form an all-party working group that will look at all the issues arising from the past. And I'll leave it at that. The definition, there's a lack of definition within the document. There's a lot of shared values, but there's also that are mentioned but not defined, which all look good on paper until you ask what's behind. Cohesion, great, sounds great. What do you mean by it? There's no definitions anywhere. So there's no definitions of what they mean by reconciliation, good relations, or even equality. We believe that reconciliation should be at the core. They're talking about a united community and a reconciled community, but again, they don't know what that is. Within the document, it actually says political leadership is key in order to change and have a positive influence on good relations. On the 9th of September, the First Minister said that Stormont is no longer fit for purpose. That's where our political leadership sits at the minute. And in order for some of the recommendations within here, particularly those in relation to equality and the Community Relations Council, require a legislative change. They need Section 75 to be changed by the Assembly. So that's the piece of legislation that deals with the equality groups. Part 1 deals with the 9 equality groups, and Part 2 deals with good relations, or sectarianism and racism, essentially. That needs to be changed in order for the Equality Commission for Northern Ireland and the Community Relations Council to be amalgamated, merged, or whatever that might look like. I just mentioned the Community Relations Council. Another issue we have with this document is that it essentially sidelines what is an independent organisation that has been working for the promotion of good relations or community relations since about 1990 without any consultation. And one of the most visible initiatives of the Community Relations Council in the last number of years has been Community Relations Week. The strategy actually said the Arts Council should take over doing Community Relations Week for some reason. And the Arts Council, not slagging them off, they're a fine organisation themselves, but what have they got to do with Community Relations Week? The Peace Building and Conflict Resolution Centre is actually held up as an example of how government is looking forward to continuing to transform society. The Peace Building and Conflict Resolution Centre is better known as the Maze and what's happening there. So this is actually a reflection of where they want our society to go, which is stuck in the mud, no decision made, absolutely no progress. Another issue is that we believe that there's a need for regional coordination when it comes to community relations work, so that best practice is carried forward, that there's continuity and standards when it comes to the work of community relations organisations. That role at the minute is filled by the Community Relations Council, and through this strategy I'm not sure that it would be continue to be supported. The actions contained within this document, and I was just talking to Colin before we kicked off, it reads very much like they phoned a lot of departments and said, have you any actions that look about good relations? That you're kind of doing anyway that we might be able to put on their strategy. So you end up with shared education campuses like the Lisnelly proposal that has been on the cards in the Department of Education for a long time. A lot of the work on here, and they phoned Dale and said, you need to do something about the NEETS programme. Let's have a United Youth programme. There's not a lot new in here. The good relations duty that they're talking about, the Community Relations Council having more authority over and having a statutory responsibility to implement, could lead to good relations becoming a tick box exercise. Very much like the equality duty has become at the minute. It's like we've all filled out those Section 75 forms, and you'll find that unless we're careful, that's the way good relations will be done. No, we're doing good relations because I'm here today. Action plans for departments are supposed to be done and delivered. How each department is going to develop and deliver good relations, these haven't been done yet. And in conclusion, I think it was a short-term solution at best. It really was a document that was written because the G8 were coming, and the UK and US were both putting a lot of pressure on. They say, you've had a shared future. You then had the cohesion, sharing and integration strategy, and you have promised a new strategy because that one's out of date. Where's your new strategy? And they got a couple of boys in a room over a weekend, and they knocked this one out by the looks of it. So that's our issues with, but we're not going to focus on those today. But I think it's important to tell you kind of the tone that our response is taken. It's far from positive. The other thing tied to this is that they've done really incredible things, like ask groups to apply for money on the back of this to-book strategy. And by they, I mean OFMDFM, without actually having any money to give out. So it means that organisations, including a number in this building, had to submit applications in January and have yet to hear whether or not they've been successful, which is just crazy making and strange way of doing business. But anyway, it's over to you at this point. What I'd love you to do is, first thing is appoint a note taker at the table, someone who's going to feed back the conversation that you're about to have. And it wouldn't be, whoever wants to do it, that's great, you're nominated. It's just the feedback. I want to be able to capture as much of the conversation as possible, and at the minute it's me in the room, and it's hard to do when there's 6 different tables. But what I'd love you to consider are the themes. Keep the same themes that are in the to-book strategy as it is. So it's around our children and young people, our shared community, our safe community, and our cultural expression. And come up with what are probably recommendations coming out of this room to see what are the actions that we would like to see supported in any future strategy or in this strategy under a revised form. So what are the actions that we want to see delivered on the ground and at the high level? And it's that mixture of the two that's going to be really important, because what this document also doesn't do is reflect the work that already takes place in organisations such as those based here and other organisations that I know are represented in the room. So we could think of those local actions, but also the big picture stuff. What are the things that we're trying to change here? And then the final thing, if you could think of our delivery mechanisms. What's the best way to go about these things? Is it local? Is it regional? Is it national? Do we need the Community Relations Council? What role of the Equality Commission? And if we could get to that, that would be brilliant. But if we get to the first point, that's great too. What time is it? Is there a clock in the room? 25 past. So if we take half an hour at that, that'd be okay. And then we'll take a bit of feedback at the end, just so we know the conversation that's taking place within the room.
I know, because you know where you are when you go through somewhere here. Another opportunity. This is very important for all the talk about shared education system. Sectarianism, political parties currently exist with no reason exist, because actually exists not sectarianism.
The number of passes in GCSE, 5 and 55% to 60%. That's not
No, what you're doing is different. So long times different.
Seems like an old
Feedback. Looking for feedback from each table. Any table want to go first? Good on, you know that. If you could talk under this is just for the recording, it's not for amplification.
Okay, well,
Lights.
the great thing about holding the pen is you actually get to write what you want to write, regardless of what people have said. But hopefully I reflected what people said. We only got at the first two subjects. Initially, I suppose looking at shared education may be suitable only as a step along the way to integrated education. As it integrated education the way forward, or is that also a sticking plaster? One of the problems here with children and young people is there's a brain drain of people who do get qualifications and go away, they don't come back, and then B, young people leaving school with no educational qualifications. And government strategy, I suppose, all about training schemes. What about apprenticeships? Maybe needing to bring that back. Just thought, what was the purpose of this NEETS action in the programme? You know, is it just to massage numbers? What form would it take? How are they going to be gauged? Is it just another example of addressing the issue after it's already happened, and the fact that children are actually leaving school with no qualifications and they're not in training? So just talked really, we need changes in the education system. The lack of emphasis on arts and, you know, this concentration on STEM might not necessarily be a great thing. We talked briefly about our shared community. Politicians actually can't show leadership themselves, you know, and they're the example we're giving out. Is Stormont itself just a sticking plaster? They talk about taking down walls, need to talk to local people and consult with them and make sure they're happy to do that or feel safe in doing that, and it has to be small steps at a time. And then discussions, you know, about small areas, internal issues within local areas need to be resolved in local areas before people can talk to other groups. And talk maybe where our sectarian attitudes developing from now, and also maybe our children are more multicultural, you know, than we ever were, and what exactly do our 17-year-olds think we maybe need to get in their views. And that's it, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you, Noah. Do you want to nominate somebody else, or if there's no volunteers? Just a table. Pick a table. This table here. Here you are. Is it you? Go for it.
So we kind of bounced all over the place with this one, but we started off talking about when they talk about taking down the barriers and the peace walls, they seem to be primarily talking about physical and not psychological, which should not be that way because they go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. And we were a little bit confused about the interface barrier support package. We don't know what that means. So it could be referring to psychological, but we're not sure. And the barriers are not only a shared community issue, but a safe community issue as well. Like we said, hand in hand. But in the papers here, they seem to be only under the safe community issue. Next, we talked about media coverage because there is not nearly enough positive media coverage happening because they don't seem to be interested in any good news stories. They seem to be only focusing on negative events and going back to the troubles and staying in the past. We then talked about the youth because they are the future. And since they didn't grow up in the troubles, they have a different outlook on what the future has and any hope that they can bring. So, and also in, say, the next 20 or 30 years, they're going to be doing the brunt of the work. So they should have a say in what decisions are going to shape their future. There's also the United Youth Strategy that was brought up, but we're unsure about whether or not there were substantial amounts of youth that were consulted in decisions being made there. They also talked about cultural expression, which currently has come with a negative vibe that's gone with it. However, it really should be a positive one because it is, in a sense, to celebrate who you are and sharing and bringing people together. However, people have selective memory, and so when they think back to the past, they think of all of the negative connotations that go with that. We also talked about education and children educating and challenging their parents. So typically, schools might try and educate the parents about, okay, this is what we should teach our kids, so you should be telling them this back at home so that they'll bring it back. But if they do that the other way around and the kids educate the parents, it might have a bigger impact and a greater change. And also, back to like what you said with they get a good education, then they go somewhere else because the opportunities aren't here. And that is not right. That should be where we actually create better jobs here so they want to stay. And maybe they should be the ones to make the jobs themselves so that then they'll be able to help the community to grow together as well as to expand and have a better future.
Okay. You should get through all that. Thank you very much. Pick a table. Who's your dude? Oh, Gemma. And Gemma, if I can ask, and it's the same for everybody, if a point's already been made by another table, we'll capture it through the other table as well. So just your unique points, if you can.
The first question we asked was there an appetite for this? Do politicians want it? And that they were sectarian themselves. There was a very strong discussion about recycling words, and it was all about self-preservation. So that's where we started. And then we went on to children and young people. We thought we needed integrated education, more of it, and that would lead to more religious tolerance. We discussed the NEET category, and we came up with we definitely need more vocational training, something like what Enterprise Ulster was like. And we need leadership and support for youth work and community relations and good relations. Their plan sounds good, but it doesn't mention how we would do some of this. And there was also discussion on, there was many 20, 30 and 40-year-olds with nothing to do, and suicide and apathy was a big issue there. Then we went on to our shared community, and we need more integrated housing. Then we had a conversation about what is community. And we asked ourselves that question. We came up with a few things like it's like-minded people looking out for one another, living in harmony, opposite to individuality, knowing one another, selflessness, and welcoming diversity. Safe community. Interface areas need worked on engaging with the communities and not really allowing them to live in bubbles. We need them to diversify. We need stability from the top down as well as the bottom up. We need real agreements, not manufactured agreements by government. On our cultural expression, flags and albums, there was a few that flags and albums were not a true cultural expression. We need more shared expression.
Dead on, Gemma. Do you want to pick a table?
Just going around it.
There we go. So do you, Colin? Another paper. Good on you.
That's not fair. Everybody else stole our ideas.
Well, that's yours. feedback will be short. Then.
Oh yeah. Who you kidding?
Anybody ever met him?
Folks, again, our conversation bounced around the court quite a bit. Not quite sure if we've ever gone to the hoop, but we took a few steers, Gerard, from your opening comments, especially around legislation and the potential for change. I think some people shared their experience that on Section 75, it basically becomes a rear-end tick box approach when it wasn't actually conceived or designed as being as such. So if the original purpose is not being met, then surely some kind of examination of that will be required. Again, on EQIAs, that they tend to be bureaucratic rather than constructive or participative, leading some comments on whose version of equality are we actually working to. Fair to say that the mood around this strategy, its predecessors, and also other strategy for our policy formation, for example, race relations, wasn't high. And the example that you gave of the Good Relations Fund, even within this building, definitely doesn't add to the current levels of confidence. I'll not repeat the point about education, but I think Owen mentioned that over maybe the last generation or so, the youth service would have been seen maybe as one of the vehicles for delivering good relations type activity for young people. But did that and does that absolve education of its responsibilities going forward? We use the term joined up governments, and I think Lynn mentioned housing. I think Gemma also mentioned integrated housing. But the point there is that you made reference to the fact that somebody may have made a call around all departments saying, give me something that you're doing that we could fit in here. My own view is that's not necessarily a bad thing. If there is good practice that could be modified, then it can add into a bigger strategy. Staying with housing, there are some good examples across Northern Ireland, but they tend to be the exception rather than the rule. On cultural expression, we tried to solve the flags issue, but then moved on.
Always approach.
We tried to finish up by talking about the mechanisms that might work best for us. And again, maybe the view of some of us that there's no argument for removing what's already there, but maybe in improving their output, let's maybe have some kind of review or evaluation of how they're contributing towards good relations, potential improved strategy. So no case for removing, but let's improve. I suppose in the mouth of RPA or Reform of Local Government, some fears that maybe there may be a new unmanaged disconnect between the regional and the sub-regional, and that maybe that's where an evolved CRC/Equality Commission function could be brought forward, but not with the current voice or lack of voice that either agency actually has. But there needs to be something that retains that sub-regional connection with the regional.
Dead on. Thanks, Colin. I think we'll just go on around this way. There's only 2 tables left at this point. Susan, is it yourself?
Yes.
There you go.
I think a lot of stuff was covered now and on all the other tables. We had an interesting mix around our table. Dennis, who's actually left from the Pulse Project, had just happened to say that just as recently as last week, the Pulse Project submitted an application for the United Youth Programme. So that was quite interesting to hear that. So what they're hoping to do is to be able to replicate the Pulse Music Project, which they're already doing in some form or other. So that there obviously is something happening if you're in the right place at the right time. So they were quite positive, or Dennis was quite positive about it, generally speaking. I think our conversation, we spent a bit of time talking about shared education. Colin, you can correct me, there was a report published a number of years ago around the financial cost of community divide. It was something that was commissioned in Deloitte, or actually...
Commissioned under direct rule, it was 2007, April.
Thank you. And
but the government has never owned it and does not publish it. You can't see it on any government thing. And that's where this figure of between £500 million and £1.5 billion every year is being spent to service a divided society. So when budget problems are an issue, they might be interested in looking at that report again and making it available to the public.
So we thought, yep, that's a question that could be asked. Can this report be made available to the general public, given that we paid for it in the first place? When we were talking, we did talk about NEETs as well briefly, around incentivising. You know, how do you get them to come and do the programmes? So there's a conversation around extending the EMA to you know, and having the United Youth Programme as an option for 16-year-old school leavers, and maybe redirecting them through that. But one of the issues that's difficult to engage in terms of, it's fine setting up a load of programmes, but what's the outcome? Is there any job at the end of it? If there's no job, what's the point? And I suppose we focused a little bit particularly on the creative industries. It's not that in this particular area, the creative industries are the creativity is very strong, the arts and everything else are very strong. But how do we, you know, if we're going to create programmes around the creative industries and the arts, there needs to be some incentive to keep people here and to have them get a job of some kind. So how does that happen? So there's a lack of opportunity once these programmes get rolled out. There appears to be a lack of opportunity. So how do you make more opportunity, I suppose? And I suppose generally speaking, we talked about, and it's what you really covered, around the lack of political leadership. We also talked about there needs to be transparency, proper governance. If you're putting out funding, there needs to be good governance around that, clear ways of showing that the money is being spent on programmes as opposed to administration. Obviously there is a cost to running a programme, and that's, you know, there should be more emphasis on enabling community organisations to have core funding so that they can get the money to deliver programmes, so that it's a separate thing. And finally, the headline actions, I suppose, they're a minimum target. They shouldn't necessarily be the target. That should be a minimum target. So that's really all, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you. Cheers, Susan. And I'm not putting pressure on you, Dennis, but that alarm going off was me. I have to put money in my car. So, quick as you can. Good man.
Right, well, under children and young people, we thought that cross-community games was just nibbling at the edges of the problem. We wondered what was meant by the United Youth Programme. There's no definition for that at all. We thought there should be integrated education with education on difference, but we wondered, were the teachers themselves unbiased? And children being born into two cultures, one thing that does unite them is the drinks culture. We suggested that there should be a period of civic service, not civil service or military service, civic service, where people learned how to look after themselves, look after each other, learned life skills and such like. Then on the shared community, we're a bit puzzled by that. Is it a shared community or is it a united community? On a safe community, we thought, well, you need to create peace before you remove the barriers. So how do we create the peace? So we're back to square one again. On cultural expression, well, as we said, a lot of it's expressed through drink. But what is culture in our context? Is it culture as high culture, or is it an expression of sectarianism or an expression of political identity? We say that culturally there should be all-inclusive festivals, celebration rather than hate fest.
Head on. Thank you, everybody. So, thank you for coming along. All of your comments, and if you could leave the comment sheets on the tables, those of you that have taken notes, that would be really, really useful. The deadline for the response, as I said earlier, is the 10th of October. And as you've all signed in, I'll have all your emails. And whenever our response is done, I will unfortunately email you a copy of our response as well. So thank you very much for taking part today. Really appreciate it. Dead on.